Hey there, welcome back to the At Home YouTube channel. As always, my name is Joey and today we're in the kitchen making something fantastic. Do you like sandwiches? I know that I do. And the one thing that every good sandwich has in common is good, fresh bread. So today that's what we're making. Today we're making fresh loaves of simple white sandwich bread. So sit back, hit that subscribe button, and let's dive right in. Alright friends, before we go over the list of ingredients today, the recipe that I'm going to be demonstrating today is for a 6 by 11 pan. I know the traditional loaf pan is 9 by 5, and therefore we do have a recipe converted for a 9 by 5 pan in the description below. But go ahead and click on that if you'd like to. For now, we're going to be doing the recipe for the 6 by 11 pan, which is 6 3/4 cups of flour, 2 tablespoons of melted butter, 2.5 cups of warm water. This is hopefully around 115 degrees. We have 3 tablespoons of granulated white sugar, 3.5 teaspoons of instant yeast, and we have 2.5 teaspoons of kosher salt. And that's really all we're gonna need today, so let's get started. So the first thing we're gonna do is bloom our yeast. I know we don't traditionally do this with instant yeast too much, but we are gonna add about 1/2 cup of the water to our yeast, and we're gonna give it a quick mix. Now we're gonna set this aside for about 5 minutes. Meanwhile, we're gonna add the rest of our dry ingredients into our flour. So the salt and the sugar, and we're gonna give this a light mix. Now we're gonna wait for our yeast to finish developing.
5 minutes later.
It's been about 5 minutes and our yeast has become nice and foamy, so it is working well. We're gonna go and add it back to the rest of the water. Now we're gonna add the 2 tablespoons of melted butter. And we're just gonna mix these together. Now we're gonna add the liquid into the flour mixture. And once the dough starts to come together, I'm gonna go ahead and start using my fingers because the spatula doesn't take us very far. Once the dough starts getting a little less sticky, I like to go ahead and rub as much of the dough off my hands as I can before it dries. And what that's gonna do is gonna allow us to incorporate it back into the dough as opposed to having dry little bits of dough left all over the place. Once the dough's all completely worked together, I like to throw a little bit of extra flour around. And now we're gonna start kneading the dough. We need the flour to make sure it's not sticky, and we're gonna knead the dough for about 7 to 8 minutes. Maybe a little less if you're really good at kneading dough, and if you haven't had much practice, maybe a little bit more.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
So now the dough is nice and has a lot of elasticity to it, and it's getting pretty smooth, and if I touch it, it springs most of the way back out. The dough's slightly sticky, but it's manageable. When I touch it, my fingers do not stick to it. I do have a larger clean bowl, and I'm just gonna put about 1.5 teaspoons of oil in the bottom. I'm gonna pick the dough up, and I'm gonna put it smooth side down in the bowl, roll it around, and then flip it over. And what that's gonna do is it's gonna coat the bowl and the dough with the oil. Now we're gonna cover it with a damp dishcloth, and I'm gonna place it somewhere warm for about an hour. We are back, and as you can see, our dough has a little over doubled in size. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna scoot it over, and we're gonna lightly dust the countertop. We don't need a whole lot of flour, just enough to keep it from sticking. We're gonna coat the rolling pin. We're just gonna gently turn the dough out. And again, we're just gonna lightly coat the top of it. And without working the dough too much, I'm gonna flip it so that we get the smooth side that's made contact with all of the flour. And I'm gonna try to roll it out into about an 11 by 15 rectangle. Now I'm gonna take the side that is the length of the pan. I'm just gonna roll so that I have one long loaf. And now that I have the loaf, I'm gonna take the greased loaf pan and I'm simply gonna roll the edges underneath the dough so that it's nice and even. And I'm gonna pick the dough up and place it into the pan. Now we're gonna let this sit for about another 45 minutes and rise again.
A little later.
We are back, and as you can see here, the bread has leavened up the rest of the way, and we do have a nice domed loaf. We've preheated the oven and melted the additional 2 tablespoons of butter. I'm just gonna go ahead right now and brush on whatever it'll take, and then we're gonna go ahead and bake off the bread. Anytime I like to bake bread, I go ahead and throw it on an extra tray, just in case something happens and it does overflow. We do have our oven preheated to 400 degrees, and right now we're gonna go ahead and go right in. We're gonna come back and check on this in about 35 minutes. So here we have our loaf of bread, and I'm gonna go ahead and brush it with the rest of the warm butter that we had melted down and let it soak into the crust while it's nice and hot. Now I'm gonna let the bread cool down for about 30 minutes or so, and then we'll come back and we'll give it a cut. All right, so it has been the half hour now for the bread to cool down. We're gonna go ahead and take it out of the pan and see how it looks. The shape's really nice. We're gonna cut. And as you can see here, we have slightly dense yet soft and fluffy bread. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut a few slices off here like we would have for a sandwich. So here we are looking at the heart of the bread. It is still just a little bit warm. You may want to let it wait just a couple more minutes. But as you can see here, you have nice, soft, rich looking bread. All right guys, well that wraps us up on how to make bread loaves for sandwiches. Comment below and let me know how yours turned out. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, be sure to subscribe. Have a great day.